Hi guys, and welcome to America History Tales. Tonight we step quietly into a snowy mountain night in 1962, where you're arriving at a lonely wooden lodge tucked high among the Rockies. With frost sparkling on the trees and a blizzard beginning to wrap the world in white. The wind moves through the valleys like a living thing. The kind of wind that makes you glance outside and think, you probably won't survive this hike if you forgot your proper coat. Luckily, you have reached the lodge because nature has already made its opinion very clear. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you are listening while preparing for sleep, post your location and your local time in the comments so we can imagine this winter journey together from all around the world. Now, dim the lights. You step out of the vehicle and immediately feel the difference between the world you left behind and this quiet mountain place. The cold touches your cheeks, the snow crunches beneath your boots, and the air smells like pine needles, frozen earth, and a hint of smoke drifting from the lodge chimney. Your breath appears in little clouds, disappearing almost as quickly as they form. It is the winter of 1962. And you have travelled into a time when reaching a mountain lodge feels like a true escape rather than a simple weekend trip. There are no smartphones glowing in your hand, no endless stream of messages waiting to interrupt the silence, and no easy way to check every weather update from a pocket-sized device. Instead, you rely on the signs around you, the darkening clouds, the rising wind, the worried glance of the driver who brought you here. The lodge stands ahead, built from heavy timber that looks as though it grew from the forest itself. Snow rests along the roof, and warm golden light spills from the windows. After hours of travelling through twisting mountain roads, that glow feels almost magical. It is not a luxury resort with polished marble floors and endless entertainment. It is a shelter, a gathering place. And for tonight, your entire little universe. You pull your coat tighter and walk toward the entrance. The wooden steps creak under your weight. The door opens with a heavy groan, and suddenly the outside world becomes distant. The roar of the wind fades behind thick walls. The smell changes from cold snow and pine to burning wood, wool blankets, and a comforting meal being prepared somewhere nearby. Inside, you notice details that belong to another era. A small radio sits near the fireplace, waiting to share music, news, or perhaps a weather report. A rack holds heavy winter coats and old-fashioned snow gear. A few guests have left their gloves near the fire to dry. The whole room feels lived in, like the lodge has been welcoming tired travellers for decades. The early 1960s are a fascinating moment in American history. In 1962, many families are beginning to experience a growing middle-class culture of vacations and road trips. Cars are becoming central to leisure travel, and improved highways are making distant destinations easier to reach. Yet places like this mountain lodge still demand patience, preparation, and respect for nature. You're not simply arriving at a destination. You're entering a conversation with the landscape. A friendly lodge keeper welcomes you with a warm smile and a reminder that the storm may become stronger overnight. You nod politely, pretending not to worry. Inside, you know that a night trapped by snow sounds romantic until you remember that romance usually involves a cozy blanket and not wondering whether the road will exist tomorrow. You remove your boots and feel the relief of standing on a wooden floor warmed by the fire below. Somewhere above you, old beams settle with soft pops and creaks. The lodge seems to breathe around you. Each sound becomes part of the evening's rhythm. As you look around, you notice small curiosities from the period. A few mountain travellers in the mid-20th century carried unusual homemade remedies for winter discomfort, including mixtures made with common household ingredients. One quirky piece of folk history is that some people once used animal fats and natural oils as skin protectants against harsh weather, believing they helped shield the face from freezing winds. Whether these methods truly helped or simply made people smell like a very determined campfire is another question. You move closer to the fireplace, watching flames dance across the logs. The warmth reaches your hand slowly. The storm outside grows louder, but inside the lodge, the feeling is different. You're surrounded by quiet conversations, soft footsteps, and the gentle clatter of dishes from the kitchen. Historians still argue whether mountain lodges of this era were mainly places of escape from modern life, or whether they represented a new form of modern tourism built around experiencing wilderness. Perhaps they were both. After all, you are here seeking something simple and timeless, but you arrived using the technology and transportation of your own age. You glance through the window one more time. The mountains have nearly disappeared behind curtains of snow. The trees bend slightly under the weight of the storm. The world beyond the glass feels enormous and mysterious, but the lodge feels small and safe. You realize that this is the strange beauty of a winter storm. It closes doors, blocks roads, and forces people to slow down. Yet it also creates moments that are difficult to find anywhere else. You sit among strangers who may become temporary companions. You listen to stories you might never hear in ordinary circumstances. You experience a night where the hours are measured not by notifications or schedules, but by the movement of snow and the fading glow of firelight. Your room waits upstairs, but there is no rush. The blizzard has already decided the pace of the evening. You have arrived. The mountains have welcomed you, and for now, the only thing left to do is settle deeper into this peaceful wooden refuge as the storm continues its slow song outside. The storm does not arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, almost politely, as if the mountains are giving you time to notice. From your place near the fireplace, you watch the first gentle snowfall become a thick curtain of white. The flakes grow larger, moving sideways now, pushed by a wind that has travelled across valleys and ridges before reaching this small wooden lodge. The windows begin to rattle softly, not enough to frighten you, but enough to remind you that the mountains are always stronger than the people who visit them. The lodgekeeper walks across the room and checks the old window latches, a simple routine repeated many times before. You notice the calm expression on his face. This is not his first storm. Outside, the road that brought you here slowly disappears. Tire tracks become shallow lines, then faint shadows, and finally nothing at all. The landscape transforms into a blank white painting. The familiar shapes of trees and hills fade away, leaving only the sound of wind and the occasional deep crack of branches adjusting under the weight of snow. You might expect a blizzard to feel dramatic, like something from a movie where everyone runs around shouting and searching for a way out. In reality, a serious mountain storm often creates a quieter kind of tension. People become more careful, voices become softer, movements become slower. Everyone understands that the weather has taken control. You watch the guests gather closer to the fire. A couple who arrived earlier in the afternoon place their hands around warm cups of coffee. An older traveller studies a newspaper that is already several days old, because in a remote lodge, yesterday's news can still feel surprisingly fresh. A young guest listens carefully to the radio as the weather report crackles through the speaker. The radio itself feels like a small connection to the outside world. In 1962, radios are still one of the most important ways people receive information, especially in places far from cities. Television is becoming increasingly common in American homes, but remote mountain locations often depend on radio signals for practical updates. That little box near the fireplace is not just entertainment. Tonight, it is a thread connecting the lodge to everything beyond the storm. You settle into a comfortable chair and listen. The broadcast fades in and out with static. The announcer's voice rises and disappears beneath the sound of interference. There is something strangely comforting about it. The imperfect signal reminds you that you are truly somewhere distant. The lodgekeeper explains that everyone will likely remain indoors until the storm weakens. You look toward the door and imagine stepping outside again. For a moment, you picture yourself walking through the snow, coat pulled tight, trying to follow the road. Then you remember the reality. Snow can hide familiar paths within minutes, and mountain weather has little patience for overconfidence. People who lived and travelled through mountain regions learned this lesson for generations. Long before modern forecasts and advanced equipment, they watched clouds, wind direction, and animal behaviour to understand changing conditions. Some of these observations were practical, while others became traditions passed down through families. One unusual piece of mountain folklore involves the belief that certain birds could predict approaching storms. Some settlers paid close attention to the movements of ravens and other mountain birds, believing their behaviour offered warnings about changing weather. Modern science does not support every old weather belief, but these traditions reveal how closely people once observed the natural world around them. You look toward the dark forest beyond the window and imagine the generations of travellers who face similar nights. Snow has always been a powerful force in the Rockies. It can create beauty and danger at the same time. The same snowfall that covers the mountains in a peaceful blanket can also make travel impossible. The Rockies themselves have a long relationship with human ambition. Throughout the 20th century, people explored these mountains for recreation, adventure, and escape. Skiing became increasingly popular during the middle decades of the century, and winter tourism grew as more families looked for ways to enjoy snowy landscapes. Still, the mountains never became completely predictable. Historians still discuss whether the growth of winter tourism changed people's relationship with wilderness by making nature more accessible or by encouraging visitors to underestimate its power. Perhaps the answer depends on the person standing in the snow. Some visitors arrive searching for excitement, while others come hoping to experience touring. You notice that the storm has changed the mood of the lodge. Earlier, everyone seemed like separate travellers with separate plans. Now, the weather has quietly brought everyone together. A storm outside creates a strange community inside. People share stories because there is nothing else to do. They pour another cup of coffee. They ask where others came from. They laugh about the terrible roads they travelled before arriving. Someone near the fireplace tells a story about a previous winter when the lodge was surrounded by snow for several days. Another guest jokes that mountain vacations have a funny habit of becoming adventures, whether you plan them or not. You smile because there is truth in that. The evening continues slowly. There are no urgent tasks, no reason to hurry upstairs. The storm has created a pocket of time separate from ordinary life. The wind outside may be fierce, but inside the lodge, everything moves at a gentle pace. You walk toward the dining area and notice the small details around you. The wooden walls carry the scent of smoke and age. The floorboards have marks from countless boots. A faded photograph hangs near the hallway, showing the lodge during an earlier winter. In the picture, the mountains look almost exactly as they do tonight, covered in snow and waiting patiently. You realize that the storm is not only trapping you in this place, it is also giving you permission to experience it fully. You are no longer just passing through. For one night, you belong here. The wind continues to press against the lodge, but the walls hold firm. The fire burns steadily. The voices around you become quieter as the evening grows deeper. Somewhere above, your room waits with blankets and a warm bed. But for now, you remain near the heart of the lodge, listening to the blizzard write its story across the mountains. The storm has settled into its rhythm now. Hours have passed since you first arrived, and the lodge no longer feels like a place you are visiting. It feels like a small world with its own rules, its own sounds, and its own gentle pace. The snow outside continues to fall, but inside, the warmth of the fire and the glow of old lamps create a feeling of comfort that seems almost timeless. You take a moment to truly look around the room. When you first entered, you are focused on escaping the cold. Now you begin noticing the details that make this mountain lodge a perfect little time capsule of 1962. The furniture is sturdy rather than fashionable. built to survive years of travellers carrying snow on their boots and stories in their pockets. The chairs near the fireplace are covered with thick fabric that has clearly welcomed many tired guests. The wooden tables show small scratches from decades of meals, card games, and handwritten notes. There is a quiet beauty in these signs of use. Nothing here is trying too hard to impress you. The lodge simply exists, comfortable and dependable, like an old friend who does not need to announce how reliable they are. The early 1960s are a fascinating period because everyday life is changing quickly. New household appliances are becoming more common, suburban homes are expanding, and popular culture is moving at a faster pace. Yet places like this lodge preserve older traditions. Here, people still gather around a fire. They still tell stories face to face. They still depend on simple comforts. You notice a small writing desk near one of the windows. A guest book rests on the top, filled with names from previous visitors. You imagine travellers from different decades sitting in the same spot, writing about their journeys. Some probably described the scenery, others probably complained about the weather, and a few may have admitted that they were not entirely prepared for mountain life. There is something charming about that honesty. Humans have always arrived in beautiful places and discovered that nature has its own personality. The mountains do not care if you're on vacation. They do not adjust the temperature because you pack the wrong jacket. They simply continue being mountains. You walk closer to the desk and notice a small collection of postcards displayed nearby. They show snowy peaks, forest trails, and cozy cabins surrounded by white landscapes. Before instant digital photos, postcards carried memories across distances. Someone could visit a place like this, choose an image, write a few sentences, and send a small piece of the journey home. The lodge itself reflects the travel culture of the era. In 1962, family road trips are becoming a major part of American leisure. The automobile allows more people to explore places that once felt unreachable. National parks, mountain towns, and remote retreats become symbols of adventure and relaxation. Of course, getting there requires effort. Roads can be narrow, weather can change quickly. Vehicles are not equipped with all the modern features people expect today. There are no helpful navigation voices calmly announcing every turn. If you miss a road sign in a snowstorm, the mountain is not going to politely suggest a better route. You glance at the old heating system and appreciate the work required to keep a place like this warm. Modern travellers often press a button and expect instant comfort. But mountain lodges in this period depend on careful maintenance and constant attention. Someone has to bring fuel, check equipment, and make sure the cold stays outside where it belongs. Near the wall, you spot a collection of winter equipment. Old skis lean beside wooden poles. Heavy boots sit beneath a bench. Thick wool scarves hang from hooks. These items tell stories of how people experienced winter before today's lightweight materials and advanced outdoor clothing. A quirky detail from mid-20th century winter culture is that many outdoor enthusiasts experimented with homemade gear improvements. Some skiers modified equipment themselves, adding personal touches to boots, bindings, and clothing because specialized products were not as widely available as they are today. A person heading into the mountains often had to be practical, creative, and slightly stubborn. You smile at the thought of it. There is something wonderfully human about solving problems with whatever is available. A loose strap, a repaired glove, a carefully patched coat. These small acts reveal the resourcefulness of ordinary people. You return to your chair near the fire, allowing the warmth to reach you again. The conversation around you has become softer. Guests speak about their homes, their families, and the places they hope to visit someday. The storm has removed distractions and created an unusual kind of openness. You begin wondering about the people who built and maintained this lodge. What did they imagine when they first placed these wooden beams together? Did they know that decades later, Someone like you would sit beside the same fireplace listening to the same mountain winds. Historians still debate whether places like remote lodges should be understood mainly as preserved pieces of the past, or as living spaces that continue changing with every generation of visitors. A building is never only wood and stone. It carries the habits, conversations, and memories of the people who pass through it. You look around once more and understand why these places remain special. The lodge is not impressive because it has the newest technology or the most luxurious decorations. It is special because it creates a feeling. It slows you down. The storm outside has removed the usual rush of daily life. There is nowhere else you need to be. No schedule to chase, no road to hurry onto. The mountain has quietly asked you to stay still for a while. Eventually, the lodge keeper announces that dinner will be ready soon. The guests begin moving towards the dining room. Shaking off blankets and stretching their legs, you follow slowly, feeling the pleasant heaviness that comes from warmth, quiet, and a full day of travel. As you step away from the fireplace and you hear the storm once again, the wind moves around the lodge, reminding you that the wilderness is still there, but now you understand something important. The storm is not just an obstacle outside the window, it is part of the experience. And tonight, in this small wooden lodge high in the Rockies, you are learning the peaceful art of letting the world slow down. The dining room feels warmer than you expected. Perhaps it is the glow of the hanging lamps, or perhaps it is the simple comfort of knowing that after hours of watching snow cover the mountains, you're about to share a meal with people who were strangers only a short time ago. The storm has a way of changing the atmosphere. It takes ordinary moments and makes them feel important. You sit at a long wooden table where the surface carries the marks of countless dinners before yours. The lodge does not feel like a restaurant where people arrive, eat quickly, and leave. It feels more like a large family kitchen where everyone happens to have come from different places. A bowl of warm soup is placed in front of you, sending up a gentle cloud of steam. The smell reaches you before the spoon does. There is the earthy scent of vegetables, herbs, and broth, mixed with the smoky aroma drifting from the nearby fireplace. Your hands wrap around the warm bowl for a moment, enjoying the simple pleasure of feeling heat return to your fingers. Across the table, the other guests begin introducing themselves. You learn that some have travelled from nearby towns, while others have come from much farther away. One couple explains that they wanted a quiet winter escape. Another traveller says he simply wanted to see the Rockies during the snow season. Though he admits he did not expect the mountains to provide such an enthusiastic welcome, everyone laughs softly. It is easy to forget how powerful shared experiences can be. In modern life, people often pass each other without speaking. Here, surrounded by snow and wooden walls, conversation becomes almost unavoidable. The storm has removed the usual escape routes. There is no reason to check the time, hurry away, or pretend you are too busy. You listen as stories move around the table. Someone talks about learning to ski as a child. Someone else remembers family vacations taken before highways became so convenient. These small memories create a picture of ordinary life in the early 1960s, a time when travel often meant packing carefully, planning routes, and accepting unexpected surprises along the way. One well-known development of the era was the rapid growth of automobile travel in North America. Better roads and increasing car ownership allowed more families to explore destinations beyond their hometowns. Mountain tourism benefited from this change, bringing more visitors to places that previously required much greater effort to reach. You imagine families loading station wagons with luggage, blankets, and supplies before heading towards snowy landscapes. The journey itself was part of the adventure. There was excitement in not knowing exactly what waited around the next mountain curve. Of course, people travelling in 1962 also relied heavily on practical knowledge. They carried paper maps, they watched weather signs, they asked locals for advice. A person might stop at a small roadside business and learn more useful information in 5 minutes of conversation than from any guidebook. The lodge keeper shares a few stories from years of welcoming travellers. He remembers guests arriving with impressive confidence and then discovering that mountain weather has a special talent for humbling everyone. You smile because it sounds familiar. The mountains have a quiet sense of humour. A curious little detail from winter travel history is that some travellers carried heated stones wrapped in cloth to warm themselves during cold journeys. Before modern portable heating solutions became common, people often relied on simple methods like this to stay comfortable. It sounds strange today, but when you're sitting beside a roaring fire during a snowstorm, you understand why people valued every bit of warmth they could find. The conversation turns toward the lodge itself. Someone asks how long it has been standing. The lodge keeper explains that many mountain retreats grew from earlier traditions of hunting cabins, railway stops, and wilderness shelters. Over time, these places became destinations where people came not only for survival or work, but for relaxation. You look around the room and notice how much personality the building carries. The walls are decorated with old photographs, carved wooden objects, and small reminders of past visitors. A pair of antique snowshoes hangs near the entrance. A faded landscape painting rests above the fireplace. Each object seems to quietly say, "Someone was here before you." Experts have long disagreed about whether these mountain retreats represented a genuine return to nature or simply created a more comfortable version of wilderness for visitors. Some argue that lodges allowed people to appreciate the outdoors in a meaningful way, while others suggest they made nature feel safer and more controlled than it truly was. You consider that question while watching snowfall beyond the window. The answer may depend on how someone approaches the mountains. A visitor who respects the environment experiences something very different from someone who sees the wilderness as merely a backdrop. The meal continues, and the room grows even more relaxed. Plates are cleared, coffee is poured, someone suggests a card game after dinner. Another guest tells a humorous story about getting lost on a mountain trail and discovering that the correct path was only a few steps away the entire time. Everyone laughs again. There is a special kind of comfort in hearing laughter during a storm. It reminds you that people have always found ways to create warmth, even when conditions outside are difficult. Throughout history, communities have gathered around fires, shared meals, and exchanged stories because connection is one of the oldest forms of shelter. You glance toward the window one more time. The snow is still falling heavily, the road remains hidden, the mountains remain silent. Yet you no longer feel trapped, you feel welcomed. The lodge has become a temporary home, and the people around the table have become temporary neighbours. Tomorrow, everyone may return to different lives, different cities, and different responsibilities, but tonight, beneath the wooden beams and the endless snowfall, you share something rare. A quiet evening where the world outside disappears, and a simple meal becomes a memory after dinner. The guests slowly leave the table and return toward the fireplace. The storm continues its steady song, and you follow the warm glow back into the main room, ready for the next chapter of this snowy night. The fireplace has become the centre of the lodge once again. After dinner, everyone naturally drifts back toward the warmth, almost as if the flames are quietly calling people closer. Outside, the blizzard continues to move across the mountains, but inside, the evening settles into a slower rhythm. You notice how much effort goes into keeping this place comfortable. The warmth does not simply appear because someone turns a switch. The lodge requires attention, preparation, and constant care. Someone has to manage the fire, check the heating system, and make sure every corner of the building remains protected from the freezing air pressing against the walls. You watch the lodge keeper carefully arrange another piece of wood onto the fire. He does it with the confidence of someone who has repeated the task countless times. He knows how the flames behave, how quickly the logs will burn, and how much heat the room needs. It is almost like having a conversation with the fire, a quiet exchange between a person and a natural element. The idea of staying warm in winter has always depended on creativity and preparation, long before modern heating systems. People built their homes around the challenge of cold weather. Thick walls, fireplaces, layered clothing, and careful use of fuel were all essential parts of daily survival. By the early 1960s, many American homes had already moved toward modern heating systems, including furnaces and improved insulation methods. However, remote mountain locations often required a different approach. A lodge surrounded by wilderness could not always rely on the same conveniences found in cities and suburbs. Here, practical knowledge remained just as important as technology. You look around the room and see the evidence of this balance between old and new. There are electric lights hanging from the ceiling. But there is still a fireplace at the heart of the lodge. There is a radio providing outside information. But there are also handwritten notes and personal stories passed from one traveller to another. The mountain has created a place where different eras exist together. You adjust the wool blanket around your shoulders and feel the texture against your hands. The blanket is thick and slightly rough, the kind of material designed for usefulness rather than appearance. Today, many people might choose softer and lighter fabrics, but in this lodge, warmth matters more than fashion. A guest sitting nearby explains that his grandfather used to prepare homes for winter by checking every window, storing extra fuel, and repairing anything that might allow cold air inside. It was a seasonal ritual, almost like preparing for a yearly visitor. You think about how different winter preparation feels today. Many people can simply increase the temperature with a button or order supplies with a few taps. In 1962, especially in isolated areas, preparation was more physical. It involved carrying, repairing, planning, and remembering. A forgotten piece of everyday history is the widespread use of hot water bottles in cold homes and travel accommodations. People place these simple containers beneath blankets to warm beds before sleeping. It was a small invention, but on a freezing night in the mountains, a warm bed could feel like a luxury. You imagine travellers decades earlier climbing into beds warmed this way, listening to storms outside just as you are now. The technology may have changed, but the desire for comfort remains exactly the same. The lodgekeeper checks the hallway and returns with a satisfied nod. Everything appears secure. The storm has become stronger, but the building is holding steady. You realize that a mountain lodge is not only a structure made from wood and nails, it is a carefully maintained relationship between people and their environment. The guests begin sharing their own memories of cold weather. One person remembers childhood mornings when frost covered the windows. Another describes winter mornings when the family car needed extra time before the engine would cooperate. You laugh at the familiar struggle. Even machines have their bad mornings. Someone jokes that cars in winter sometimes needed more encouragement than passengers. The room fills with gentle laughter. And for a moment, the storm feels far away. Researchers still examine how mid-20th century Americans balanced comfort with self-reliance as technology became more available. Some believe modern conveniences reduced people's connection to seasonal changes, while others argue that technology simply allowed people to experience winter in new ways. You look around the lodge and see both sides of that idea. The building has electricity, but it still depends on human effort. It has modern conveniences, but it still requires respect for the mountain. The wind suddenly grows louder, rushing around the corners of the lodge. Everyone becomes quiet for a moment. The sound is deep and powerful, almost like the mountain itself is reminding you that it is still there. You watch snow move across the window in swirling patterns. It's beautiful, but you understand why people treated storms seriously. A mountain blizzard is not something to ignore. It can transform familiar landscapes into confusing white spaces. Yet inside this room, the storm creates a strange sense of peace. The fire continues burning. The lamps continue glowing. The walls continue holding back the cold. You settle deeper into your chair and listen to the small sounds around you. The crackle of wood, The movement of footsteps across the floor, the quiet conversations between guests, the occasional pop from the heating system. These sounds become a kind of winter music. You realize that staying warm is not only about temperature, it is also about companionship, routine, and feeling connected to a place. The lodge provides all three. The night is still young, and the storm shows no sign of leaving. Soon, you will prepare for sleep and discover what it feels like to rest while surrounded by a mountain blizzard. But for now, you remain beside the fire, watching the flames rise and fall, grateful for every small comfort this wooden refuge provides. The storm continues its steady performance outside, but inside the lodge, the evening has become softer and slower. The fire has settled into glowing embers. The conversations have become quieter, and the smell of dinner still lingers gently in the air. You sit back for a moment, allowing yourself to appreciate the unusual feeling of being completely removed from ordinary life. There is no rushing towards the next appointment, no checking messages, no wondering what is happening every few miles away. The mountain has placed you in a small pocket of time where the most important things are simple. Stay warm, share a meal, listen to the wind, rest. The dining room remains one of the coziest places in the lodge. Earlier, it was filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter. Now, you notice smaller details, the quiet clink of dishes being organised, the soft scrape of a chair moving across the floor, the faint scent of coffee left behind in a pot near the kitchen. The lodge staff move with practiced calm. They know that feeding guests during a winter storm is not just about providing food. It's about creating a sense of normal life when the outside world has become uncertain. You think about how meals have always played an important role during difficult conditions. Across history, people have gathered around shared tables during storms, winters, and long journeys. Food becomes more than fuel, it becomes reassurance. The early 1960s were a fascinating time for American food culture. Convenience foods were becoming increasingly popular, with more households using packaged ingredients and new kitchen appliances. At the same time, many remote lodges continued relying on traditional cooking methods because fresh supplies and modern conveniences were not always easy to access in the mountains. You imagine the kitchen behind the dining room, pots simmering on the stove, ingredients carefully stored, someone checking supplies and planning meals around what is available. A mountain kitchen requires flexibility. You cannot simply run to the nearest supermarket when the nearest road is buried under snow. The lodgekeeper brings out another pot of coffee, and the guests gather around once more. Someone begins telling a story about a family recipe passed down through generations. Another person describes a favourite winter meal from home. Food has a strange ability to connect people. A simple bowl of soup can carry memories of childhood. Certain smell can bring back an entire place. Even after decades pass, people often remember the meals they shared during meaningful moments. You notice a small shelf near the kitchen filled with old jars and containers. Some hold preserved foods prepared ahead of the winter season. Others contain ingredients that can last through difficult weather. This careful storage reflects a long tradition of preparing for uncertainty. An unusual footnote from culinary history is that many mountain communities developed their own methods of preserving food because isolation required creativity. Pickling, drying, smoking, and canning were not simply hobbies. They were practical skills that helped families and travelers make it through seasons when fresh options were limited. You smile when you think about how modern people sometimes rediscover these old methods as trendy activities. What was once necessary survival knowledge has become a weekend project for many. The guests continue talking, and you notice something interesting. The storm has created a temporary community. These people would probably never have met under normal circumstances. They come from different backgrounds, different places, and different daily routines. Yet tonight, everyone shares the same roof and the same weather outside. The question of how food shapes social connections has fascinated researchers for years. Scholars continue to examine whether communal meals were more important in the past because people had fewer distractions, or whether humans have always naturally used food as a way to build relationships. You look around the table and think the answer may be obvious. The reason does not matter as much as the feeling itself. A shared meal creates a moment where people slow down and pay attention to one another. The conversation eventually turns toward travel. Guests discuss roads they have driven, places they have visited, and destinations they hope to see. Someone mentions that winter journeys require a different mindset. You cannot fight the weather, you have to cooperate with it. That idea stays with you. The mountains have a way of teaching patience. They do not respond to impatience or frustration. The snow falls at its own pace. The wind moves when it chooses. The only reasonable response is acceptance. You glance toward the window again. The glass is covered with tiny patterns of frost. Beyond it, the world is hidden beneath layers of snow, the road, the trees, and the distant slopes have all blended together. Yet the lodge feels alive. The warmth from the kitchen travels through this building. The smell of wood smoke mixes with the scent of coffee. The voices around you create a gentle background sound. Every small detail reminds you that comfort is often created through ordinary things. Experts have long debated whether mountain hospitality traditions survived because they were practical necessities or because they represented a deeper cultural desire for connection. Perhaps both ideas are true. A traveller needs shelter from the cold, but they also need kindness from the people offering that shelter. You finish your drink and place the cup on the table. The simple action feels strangely peaceful. Tonight is not about grand adventures or dramatic discoveries. It is about noticing small moments, the warmth of the room, the taste of a comforting meal, the sound of strangers becoming companions, the quiet strength of a lodge standing against the storm. Eventually, the guests begin moving back toward the main room. The evening meal is finished, but the night is far from over. The blizzard continues outside, and soon you will begin preparing for your first sleep in this mountain refuge. You follow the others toward the fireplace, carrying with you the feeling that this place is becoming more familiar with every passing hour. The storm may have closed the roads, but it has opened a different kind of journey. The night has grown deeper over the mountains. After dinner and the long conversations beside the fire, the lodge begins to settle into a quieter mood. One by one, guests start making their way upstairs, carrying blankets, lanterns, and the tired expressions of travellers who have spent the day moving through cold air and snowy roads. You follow slowly, taking one last look at the main room before leaving. The fireplace still glows softly. The chairs remain gathered around the warmth, waiting for tomorrow's conversations. The old radio continues playing quietly in the background, its gentle sound blending with the distant roar of the wind. The stairs creak beneath your feet as you climb. Each step reminds you that this building has been here for many winters before yours. The wood has absorbed countless footsteps, countless conversations, and countless nights when travellers listen to storms outside. At the top of the stairs, the hallway is dimly lit. The lamps create small pools of golden light along the walls. Your room is simple, exactly what you need after such a long day. A bed covered with thick blankets waits in the corner. A small table holds a glass of water and a lamp. The window looks out toward the endless white landscape. Though tonight the mountains are hidden behind darkness and snow, you enter and close the door behind you. For a moment, the silence feels surprising. Downstairs, the lodge was full of voices and movement. Here, you are surrounded by a different kind of quiet. It is not empty silence. It is the sound of a building resting. You remove your coat and place it carefully on a chair. The cold from outside still clings to the fabric. Your boots sit near the door, carrying small pieces of snow that melt slowly onto the wooden floor. You move toward the bed and feel the softness of the blankets. They are heavier than the ones you might find in a modern hotel, designed to hold warmth rather than create a perfect appearance. The room is comfortable, but not overly polished. Everything has a purpose. This reflects the practical nature of mountain accommodations during this period. Lodges were built around the needs of travellers who wanted shelter, warmth, and connection with the landscape. They were not designed to separate guests from nature completely. Instead, they created a safe place where people could experience the wilderness without being entirely exposed to it. During the early 1960s, a defining development in American travel was the increasing popularity of outdoor recreation. More families were exploring national parks, forests, and mountain destinations as leisure activities became more accessible. Camping, skiing, hiking, and cabin vacations became part of a growing culture of enjoying the outdoors. You sit on the edge of the bed and listen. The first sound you notice is the wind. It moves around the lodge in long waves, sometimes gentle and low, sometimes rising into a powerful whistle. The sound changes constantly. One moment it seems far away, like a storm crossing another valley. The next moment it feels close, pressing against the walls. Then you hear the smaller sounds, the occasional pop of the wooden beams, the soft movement of someone walking down the hallway, the quiet hum of the heating system, the gentle settling of the building as temperatures shift outside. These sounds create a strange kind of comfort. In a city, silence can feel unusual. Here, the sounds of the mountain remind you that you are protected inside a living structure surrounded by a living landscape. You look toward the window and notice frost forming along the edges of the glass. The patterns look almost like tiny branches spreading across the surface. Before, modern insulated windows became common everywhere. Frost patterns were a familiar sight in colder homes and buildings. A charmingly strange detail from winter history is that some people used decorative methods to make frosted windows part of the experience. In earlier generations, before central heating and advanced insulation changed indoor environments, frozen glass was not only a problem to solve, sometimes people admired the natural designs created by ice. You imagine previous guests waking up to similar patterns decades earlier. They may have looked through the same kind of frosted window, watching snow cover the mountains outside. You pull the blankets higher and settle into bed. The mattress feels firm, supporting you after the long journey. There is no expectation that you need to entertain yourself, no screen glowing beside you, no endless information waiting to capture your attention. The storm has created something rare, a pause. There is still a connection to the outside world through the radio downstairs, but your room feels removed from everything else. You're alone with your thoughts, the sound of weather, and the peaceful knowledge that you have nowhere else to go. There is ongoing discussion among historians about how weather people in earlier generations experienced greater awareness of their surroundings because they had fewer technological distractions. Some suggest that slower communication and fewer conveniences encouraged deeper observation. Others point out that every generation has its own ways of becoming distracted. You consider this while listening to the wind. Perhaps the difference is not only technology, perhaps it is simply the situation. A storm has given you permission to stop. It has created a moment where attention naturally returns to simple things. The warmth of the blankets, the smell of the wooden room, the sound of snow against the window, the feeling of being safely sheltered. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the landscape outside. Snow-covered trees stand quietly beneath the dark sky. Mountain peaks disappear into clouds. The entire wilderness rests beneath the storm. Somewhere below, the fire continues burning. The lodgekeeper makes his final checks for the night. Doors are secured, lamps are lowered, supplies are prepared for morning. The building so slowly becomes quieter. You begin to understand that sleeping in a mountain lodge during a blizzard is not only about rest, it is about experiencing a different relationship with time. The night moves slowly, and you move with it. The storm does not need your attention. The mountains do not need your approval. The world simply continues. You sink deeper into the blankets, listening to the wind create its endless winter song. The lodge stands firm around you, holding warmth against the cold, carrying the memories of everyone who has rested within these walls. And as the snow continues falling outside, you allow yourself to drift closer towards sleep. Sleep does not come immediately, even though you are comfortable. Your mind remains awake for a little while, still holding on to the sounds and sensations of the evening. The storm outside has created a world that feels completely separate from the one you knew before arriving. You lie beneath the blankets, listening to the wind move across the mountains, and your thoughts slowly return to the journey that brought you here. The road to this lodge was not just a path between two places. In 1962, reaching a remote mountain retreat required patience, planning, and a willingness to accept surprises. Travel itself was part of the experience. The destination mattered, but the journey shaped the memory. You picture the road again, the winding mountain route, the dark trees standing beside the highway, the snow beginning to collect along the edges, the vehicle climbing higher into the Rockies. Every turn required attention. Every change in weather required respect. Today, people often think of travel as a simple transition. You enter a vehicle, follow directions, and arrive. But mountain travel in the middle of the 20th century still carried a sense of uncertainty. A missed turn, a mechanical problem, or a sudden storm could transform a comfortable trip into a serious challenge. A defining development of the early 1960s was the continued expansion of automobile culture across North America. Cars represented freedom, independence, and the ability to explore places that had once been difficult to reach. Families planned road trips, travelers searched for scenic destinations, and mountain areas became increasingly popular for recreation. You remember the vehicle that carried you here? It was dependable, but it was not designed to make every problem disappear. There were no digital screens showing your exact location, no automated warnings telling you that snow conditions were changing ahead. Instead, drivers relied on experience, maps, and local knowledge. That slower style of travel created a different relationship with the landscape. You had to notice things, the shape of the road, the colour of the sky, the movement of clouds above the peaks, the way locals spoke about upcoming weather. A mountain journey required attention because the environment was always part of the conversation. You think about the driver who brought you to the lodge. Before leaving, he probably checked supplies carefully. Extra blankets, basic tools, emergency equipment, a full tank of fuel. These preparations were ordinary habits for many people travelling through isolated regions. A lesser-known habit from earlier road travel was that some drivers kept paper road atlases filled with handwritten notes about difficult areas, favourite sus, and reliable fuel stations. These personal maps became private travel records, carrying memories from one journey to the next. A modern traveller might save digital locations. These older maps carried fingerprints, coffee stains, and years of use. You smile at the thought of a worn map folded again and again until the creases became permanent. There is something personal about objects that travel with people. The mountains outside your window are quiet now, but you imagine the many travellers who crossed these landscapes before you. Some came for adventure, some came for work, some came simply because they wanted to experience a place where the world felt larger and more powerful than themselves. The relationship between humans and mountain roads has always been complicated. Roads make wilderness more accessible, but they also change the places they reach. Researchers continue to explore the question of whether improved access to remote landscapes encourages appreciation or whether it slowly reduces the feeling of true isolation. You consider the lodge itself as part of that question. Without roads, this place would be much harder to visit, yet because the road exists, you can experience the silence of the mountains. The road brought you here, but it also brought change. This balance appears everywhere in history. People seek untouched places, but they also create the tools that allow them to reach those places. You shift slightly beneath the blankets and listen to another sound from outside, perhaps a branch moving beneath the weight of snow, perhaps the wind changing direction. The storm continues, creating its own patterns. Your thoughts return to winter driving. You imagine families in the early 1960s packing their cars for snowy vacations, children wearing heavy coats in the back seat, parents checking supplies before leaving, paper maps spread across the dashboard, a thermos of coffee waiting for a roadside stop. The journey itself became a story. There was excitement in stopping at unfamiliar places. There was curiosity about small towns along the way. There was a feeling that every mile revealed something new. Of course, winter travel also demanded caution. Roads could become dangerous quickly. Mountain passes were especially challenging because conditions could change without much warning. Travelers learned that confidence was useful, but humility was essential. The mountains always had the final word. You think back to the lodgekeeper's calm expression when the storm arrived. He understood something that visitors sometimes forget. The goal is not to defeat nature. The goal is to move through it wisely. This lesson has remained true for generations. The storm outside does not feel like an enemy anymore. It feels like part of the environment that makes this place special. Without the snow, without the cold, without the challenge of reaching this lodge, the experience would not feel the same. The journey created the moment. You close your eyes again and imagine the road disappearing beneath fresh snow, the mountain standing silently above everything, the lodge glowing warmly in the distance. You realize that every person who arrived here tonight carried a different story, different reasons for travelling, different memories waiting at home. But the road brought everyone to the same place. A snowy refuge, a wooden lodge, a quiet night in the Rockies. The wind continues outside, but your thoughts begin slowing down. The journey is behind you now. The road has disappeared beneath the storm, and all that remains is the peaceful feeling of having arrived somewhere special. You let the sound of the blizzard carry you deeper into rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring another part of this mountain story. The storm has carried you deep into the night, and the lodge now feels almost like a place outside ordinary time. You remain tucked beneath the blankets, listening to the soft conversation between the wind and the wooden walls. The mountains are hidden in darkness, but the lodge itself feels full of invisible stories. Every creaking floorboard, every worn piece of furniture, and every mark in the wood seems to suggest that many people have stood where you're standing now. The building is not just a shelter from snow. It is a collection of memories held together by timber, nails, and countless human moments. You think about the people who arrived here before you. Perhaps a family celebrating a winter holiday. Perhaps a traveller searching for solitude. Perhaps someone who simply wanted to sit near a fire and watch snowfall outside. Each visitor left something behind, even if it was only a brief conversation or a name written in a guest book. You remember the small desk downstairs and the pages filled with handwriting from different years. Those words are tiny pieces of personal history. A sentence written by a guest decades ago can reveal what mattered to them at that exact moment. Maybe they described the weather. Maybe they mentioned the beauty of the mountains. Maybe they simply wrote that they had a wonderful stay. Simple words can become historical treasures. This is one of the fascinating things about social history. The past is not only found in famous events, important leaders, or grand monuments. It also exists in ordinary places where everyday people lived, travelled, ate, rested, and shared experiences. The lodge represents that quieter side of history. A defining feature of the mid-20th century was the growing importance of leisure and recreation in everyday life. As working hours, transportation, and incomes changed for many families, vacations became increasingly common. Places like mountain lodges offered people a chance to step away from routine and experience something different. You imagine the guests who stayed here during the years before your visit. The clothing styles changed, the vehicles changed, the conversations changed, but the feeling of arriving somewhere warm after a cold journey probably remained exactly the same. The desire for comfort is timeless. You think about the objects around the lodge, the old photographs, the wooden chairs, the fireplace tools, the faded decorations. Each item has a story. A curious little piece of lodge history is that many early mountain retreats displayed collections of unusual objects brought back by owners or guests, including old tools, animal tracks, handmade crafts, and local souvenirs. These displays were often informal museums created without official planning. They reflected the personality of the people who lived and worked there. You imagine a shelf filled with small reminders of past adventures. A carved wooden figure from a nearby town, a stone collected from a hiking trail, a forgotten postcard from someone who wanted to remember the view. None of these things seem important by themselves. Together, they create a feeling. You wonder about the lodge employees as well. The people who cooked meals, cleaned rooms, repaired equipment, and welcomed travellers. Their work often remained unnoticed. Yet they shaped every guest's experience. Behind every peaceful vacation is someone making sure everything functions properly. Someone checking the supplies, someone preparing the firewood, someone clearing paths after snowfall. Someone making sure a traveller feels welcome. The story of a place is always made by more people than the visitors see. You look toward the window again. The frost has grown thicker, creating new patterns across the glass. The outside world remains hidden, but your imagination fills in the details. You picture the forest covered in snow, the mountain slopes resting beneath clouds, and the narrow road waiting for morning. There is still a question that historians and preservation experts continue to explore. Should places like old mountain lodges be protected exactly as they were, or should they continue changing to meet modern needs? Some believe preserving every detail keeps the past alive. Others argue that adaptation allows historic places to survive. The lodge around you seems to exist somewhere between those ideas. It has modern features, but it keeps its character. It provides comfort, but it does not erase the feeling of being in the mountains. It welcomes visitors, but it still respects the landscape around it. That balance may be the reason places like this remain meaningful. You imagine the conversations that have happened in this room over the years, guests discussing weather, politics, family, and dreams. Someone laughing near the fireplace. Someone quietly reading a book while snow falls outside. The topics change with every generation. The setting remains. There is something comforting about knowing that people across decades have experienced similar moments. Someone else once sat beside this fire. Someone else once listened to the same winter sounds. Someone else once looked through these windows and felt the same mixture of wonder and peaceful isolation. The past suddenly feels closer, not like a distant collection of dates and facts, but like a series of ordinary evenings connected together. Your own evening becomes part of that invisible chain. You arrived during a storm. You shared a meal with strangers. You listened to stories. You watched the fire. You prepared for sleep while snow surrounded the lodge. Years from now, this night would exist only as a memory, but for now, it's happening completely. The wind outside begins to soften slightly, or perhaps you're simply becoming more accustomed to its rhythm. Either way, the storm no longer feels overwhelming. It has become a background presence, like a quiet companion. You settle deeper into the bed and think about the stories hidden within these walls. Every building has memories, every road has travellers, every landscape has witnesses. The mountains have seen generations come and go, but for one winter night in 1962 you are here. You are part of the lodge's story, and as the snow continues falling gently over the Rockies, the wooden walls hold your moment alongside all the others that came before. Morning still feels far away, even though the deepest part of the night has begun to pass. You remain in your room, wrapped in warmth, while the Rockies continue their silent conversation outside. The storm has hidden the landscape, but your imagination keeps returning to the world beyond the window. You think about the mountains themselves, not just as a beautiful background for photographs, but as a living environment with its own patterns, creatures, and ancient rhythms. The lodge is only one small point in a much larger wilderness. Beyond the wooden walls, snow covers forests, valleys, and slopes that have existed long before anyone built a road through these peaks. The thought is strangely calming. You're not controlling the mountain, you're simply spending a little time within it. During this era, a growing interest in outdoor recreation encouraged more people to explore natural landscapes. The 1960s saw increased attention toward national parks, conservation, and outdoor experiences as Americans looked for ways to connect with the environment. More families were discovering hiking, camping, skiing, and mountain vacations as meaningful ways to spend their free time. You imagine visitors arriving with cameras, winter clothing, and a sense of curiosity. They came hoping to see something different from their everyday surroundings. The mountains offered distance from busy streets, crowded neighborhoods, and familiar routines. The wilderness promised quiet, and tonight it has certainly delivered. You glance around your room and realize how unusual it is to feel completely surrounded by nature. In many places, people sleep surrounded by the sounds of traffic, machines, and city life. Here, the loudest sound is the wind moving across the snow. You listen carefully. A low, rushing sound travels across the valley. A branch shifts somewhere outside, so slides gently from the roof. The lodge responds with small movements of its own. These sounds become a kind of nighttime language. You think about the animals living beyond the window. The forest is not empty just because you cannot see movement. Hidden beneath the snow, life continues. Birds seek shelter. Small animals move carefully through the landscape. Larger creatures follow familiar paths through the mountains. A surprising detail from winter wildlife history is that some mountain communities once relied heavily on observing animal behavior to understand seasonal changes. Before modern scientific equipment became widely available, people paid close attention to tracks, feeding patterns, and movements in the landscape. These observations did not always provide perfect predictions, but they reflected a close relationship with the natural world. You imagine following tracks through fresh snow, trying to identify which creatures passed through during the night. Every mark tells a small story. A line of footprints, a disturbed patch of snow, a broken branch. The wilderness leaves messages everywhere. You wonder how different your experience would feel if you stepped outside right now. The beauty would be incredible. But the cold would immediately remind you that the mountains are not simply a peaceful painting. They are a demanding environment. The same snow that creates a beautiful scene can cover paths and make travel difficult. The same quiet forest that feels magical during the day can become unfamiliar after sunset. This balance between beauty and challenge is what makes mountain landscapes so powerful. Researchers have offered different explanations for why humans are drawn to difficult environments. Some believe people seek mountains because they represent challenge and achievement. Others suggest that people are attracted to places where they can escape noise and experience a deeper sense of calm. You think both ideas might be true. A person may arrive searching for adventure but discover peace instead. You remember the journey here, the winding road, the rising elevation, and the first sight of the lodge glowing through the snowfall. The destination was important, but the process of reaching it changed how you experienced the place. The mountain demanded attention. It required patience. It encouraged you to slow down. You sit quietly and imagine the landscape before roads and lodges existed. The Rockies have witnessed countless generations pass through these valleys. Indigenous communities, explorers, workers, travelers, and tourists have all created different relationships with these mountains. Each group saw the landscape in its own way. For some, these mountains represented home. For others, opportunity. For others, a place to rest and reflect. The meaning of wilderness has always depended on the person experiencing it. There is still discussion among historians about how 20th century tourism changed people's understanding of nature. Some researchers believe tourism helped more people appreciate and protect wilderness areas. Others suggest that increased visitation sometimes encouraged people to view nature as something designed mainly for human enjoyment. You look around the lodge and consider this complicated relationship. The building allows you to experience the mountains, but it also changes the environment. The road brought you closer, but it also created a connection that did not exist before. Human beings have always shaped the places they visit. The challenge is learning how to do so carefully. The storm outside begins to shift slightly. The wind no longer feels as powerful as before. The snow continues falling, but there is a sense that the mountain is becoming calmer. You imagine the first light of morning eventually reaching the peaks. The snow will sparkle, the trees will stand covered in white. The world that disappeared during the storm will slowly return, but for now, the darkness allows you to focus on something else, the feeling of being sheltered, the feeling of listening, the feeling of being part of a landscape much larger than yourself. You close your eyes again and picture the mountains stretching beyond the lodge. Their slopes disappear into the distance. Their forests hold secrets. Their valleys carry echoes of countless winters. The Rockies are not just scenery. They are a presence. And tonight, while you rest inside this small wooden lodge, you are sharing a quiet moment with a wilderness that has been telling stories for thousands of years. The hours after midnight have a special feeling in the mountains. They are not quite yesterday anymore, but they are not yet tomorrow. Time seems to stretch inside the lodge, moving gently with the rhythm of the fire and the falling snow. You remain awake for a little longer, not because you are uncomfortable, but because the quiet feels too unusual to ignore. You sit up slightly and look around the room. The lamp beside the bed casts a soft circle of light across the wooden walls. Everything appears calmer now. The excitement of arrival has faded. The conversations from dinner have become memories. The storm that once felt powerful and intimidating has become a steady background sound. You think about how rare it is to experience a place without constantly measuring time. In ordinary life, hours are divided into appointments, errands, responsibilities, and reminders. Here, the night follows a different pattern. The snowfall decides the pace, the fire decides the mood. The mountains decide when the world slows down. You remember the people downstairs, the travellers who arrived with their own stories and worries, the guests who, for one evening, became a small community because the weather gave them no reason to remain strangers. There is something deeply human about gathering during difficult conditions. Throughout history, people have shared warmth and conversation during storms, long winters and uncertain journeys. A fire was never only a source of heat, it was also a place where memories were created. The early 1960s were a period when many aspects of American life were changing rapidly. Homes, workplaces, entertainment, and travel habits were being transformed by new technologies and shifting social expectations. Yet in places like this lodge, many older traditions remained strong. People still gathered around fires, told stories aloud, and enjoyed moments that were not interrupted by constant communication. You imagine how different this night might feel if you brought the habits of the modern world with you. Perhaps you would search for information every few minutes or worry about everything happening elsewhere. Instead, the storm has quietly removed those distractions. The mountain has given you permission to focus on the present. You walk toward the window and look at the frost patterns again. The glass feels cold when you touch it. Beyond the window, darkness covers the landscape, but you know the mountains are there. Sometimes not seeing something makes you more aware of it. You cannot see the peaks, but you feel their presence. You cannot see the forest clearly, but you hear it. You cannot see the storm's path, but you understand its power. A curious detail from social history is that many travellers in earlier decades kept personal journals during trips. recording small observations that would seem ordinary at the time. A note about a meal, a weather change, or a conversation could later become a valuable glimpse into everyday life. People were unknowingly preserving pieces of history through simple personal writing. You wonder if any previous guest at this lodge wrote about a night like this. Perhaps someone described the same sounds. Perhaps someone complained about the cold before admitting they loved the experience. Perhaps someone promised to return someday. Travel memories often work this way. The details that seem small become the ones people remember. The smell of smoke from the fireplace, the sound of boots drying near the entrance, the warmth of a shared meal, the strange comfort of a storm keeping everyone indoors. You return to the chair near the window and settle in again. The lodge feels peaceful, but your thoughts become reflective. You begin thinking about how people in 1962 viewed progress and tradition. The world outside this lodge was changing quickly. New inventions were becoming part of everyday life. Television was spreading into more homes. Transportation was improving. Communities were becoming more connected through expanding communication networks. Yet many people still searched for places where life felt slower. That search remains familiar even today. Researchers continue to explore the idea of whether people seek remote places because they truly want isolation or because they want a temporary escape before returning to a connected world. Some argue that retreats like mountain lodges provide balance rather than separation. Others believe they represent a desire to recover something lost through modernization. You look around the room and think about that. This lodge is not completely disconnected from the world. It has electricity, it has a radio, it has roads leading toward it, but it creates a feeling of distance. Perhaps that is what people have always searched for, complete isolation. Just enough quiet to hear themselves think. The fire downstairs has probably burned lower now. The lodgekeeper may be making one final walk through the building, checking doors and ensuring everything is safe. These small routines are part of keeping a mountain refuge alive. You think about the unseen work behind peaceful moments. Someone prepared the room before you arrived. Someone stored supplies before winter. Someone cleared paths through snow. Someone made sure the fire would continue burning. Comfort often depends on effort that remains invisible. The wind outside changes direction, creating a softer sound against the roof. You notice that the storm no longer feels like something surrounding you. Instead, it feels like something accompanying you. The mountains are not empty, they are simply quiet. You lie back down and pull the blankets around your shoulders. The weight feels reassuring. Your body is tired from travel, fresh air, and a day filled with unfamiliar experiences. You think about tomorrow. Eventually, the storm will weaken. The roads will become visible again. The guests will return to their separate lives. The lodge will become another stop on another journey. But this night will remain different. There are moments when history feels especially close. Not because something famous happened, but because ordinary people experienced something meaningful. A family meal, a difficult journey, a quiet evening beside a fire. Those moments are where much of human history actually lives. You close your eyes and listen once more. The wind, the wood, the distant movement of the lodge, all of it blends together into a gentle rhythm. The mountain outside continues standing silently beneath the snow, and inside the lodge, you drift closer towards sleep, carrying with you the peaceful feeling of being somewhere far away from everything, yet completely connected to the simple experiences that have comforted people for generations. The deepest hours of the night arrive quietly. There is no dramatic moment announcing their arrival, no sudden change that tells you midnight has passed and the early morning waits somewhere ahead. Instead, the lodge simply grows stiller. The voices disappear, the footsteps fade. The fire settles into a softer glow. You wake briefly from a light sleep and notice that the storm is still there. The wind moves across the mountains with a slow, steady force. Snow brushes against the window like tiny grains of sand. The sound is gentle enough to be calming, yet powerful enough to remind you that the wilderness remains just beyond the walls. For a moment, you simply listen. There is a strange comfort in knowing that the lodge is surrounded by such a powerful landscape while you rest safely inside. The storm is not something you need to fight, it is something you are experiencing. You pull the blanket closer and think about the many people throughout history who have faced long winter nights before modern heating, weather reports, and reliable transportation. Winter demanded preparation and patience. A storm could change plans instantly and force people to depend on their own skills and the support of their communities. By the middle of the 20th century, many technologies had made winter life easier, but remote areas still required old-fashioned habits. Mountain travelers needed to respect conditions, carry proper supplies, and understand that nature could not always be controlled. The lodge itself represents this combination of progress and tradition. It has electricity, communication, and modern comforts. But it still depends on human attention. Someone must maintain the building, someone must prepare for bad weather, someone must understand the mountain. You think about the storm outside and how it has changed your relationship with time. Earlier, you were focused on arriving, then you were focused on dinner, conversation, and settling in. Now, there is only the present moment. The hours before dawn have a special kind of silence. A forgotten piece of winter history is that many travellers once carried small personal comfort items during long journeys, such as pocket-sized books, playing cards, or handwritten letters. These simple objects helped pass time during delays caused by weather. A storm could interrupt a journey, but it did not have to make the experience empty. You imagine a traveller decades ago sitting in this same lodge, reading by firelight while waiting for the snow to stop. Perhaps they wrote a letter home describing the unexpected adventure. Perhaps they played a card game with strangers. Perhaps they simply watched the flames and enjoyed the rare chance to do nothing. There is something peaceful about that idea. Modern life often encourages constant activity. Even moments of rest can become filled with entertainment and information. But a mountain storm creates a different kind of pause. It removes choices and leaves you with something simple. Be still. Listen. Wait. The storm teaches patience without saying a word. You look toward the window and wonder what the landscape looks like now. The snow may have covered every track from yesterday. The road may have disappeared completely. The trees may be carrying heavy layers of white. The world outside has changed while you slept. That is one of the quiet wonders of winter. It transforms familiar places without asking permission. You think about how humans have always tried to understand and predict weather. Farmers watched skies. Sailors studied winds. Mountain communities observed signs in nature. Today, scientific tools provide detailed forecasts, but the desire to understand changing conditions remains the same. The question of how much control people truly have over nature has remained a fascinating topic among researchers. Some scholars suggest that technology has allowed humans to manage environmental challenges more effectively. Others point out that extreme weather continues to remind us of our limits. The blizzard outside your window is a gentle example of that truth. The lodge is strong. The preparations were careful. The people inside are comfortable. But the storm still decides when the road opens again. You find that strangely reassuring. There is relief in remembering that not everything depends on human schedules. The mountains continue following their own patterns. The snow falls because it falls. The wind moves because it moves. You close your eyes again and let yourself drift. The room has its own familiar smells now. The scent of wood from the walls, the faint trace of smoke carried from the fireplace, the clean, cold freshness entering whenever someone opens a door downstairs. These details become connected to the memory of this place, years later. You may not remember every conversation from this night. You may forget small details about the journey. But you will remember the feeling of being surrounded by snow, the feeling of warmth inside a wooden lodge, the feeling of listening to a storm while knowing you are safe. This is how many memories are created, not through major events, but through ordinary moments that happen under unusual circumstances. A warm room during a cold night, a shared meal during a storm, a quiet morning waiting to arrive. The lodge has become more than a building. It has become a temporary refuge from the speed of everyday life. You think about the guests downstairs. By morning, everyone will probably gather again near the fire. They will discuss the storm, compare stories, and discover how much snow fell overnight. They will laugh about the road conditions and wonder when they can continue their journeys. For now, though everyone is resting, everyone is waiting, the storm continues its work outside, covering the mountains in silence. Slowly, the sound begins to blend with your thoughts. The wind becomes softer. Your breathing becomes slower. The warmth of the blankets feels heavier and more comfortable. The deepest part of the night is passing. Soon, the first hints of morning will arrive. The mountains will return. The road will appear again. The lodge will wake up. But before that happens, you have a little more time to remain here, suspended between sleep and awareness, protected by wooden walls and surrounded by the peaceful power of the Rockies. The first signs of morning arrive slowly, almost shyly. You do not wake because of an alarm or a sudden sound. Instead, you notice a change in the room. The darkness has softened. The storm sounds different. The wind that surrounded the lodge for so many hours now seems quieter, as if the mountains themselves are beginning to relax. You open your eyes and remain still for a moment. The blankets are warm. The wooden walls hold the memory of the night. The air in the room feels cool and fresh, carrying the peaceful feeling that comes after a long storm. Outside, the world is beginning again. You sit up and look towards the window. The frost patterns are still there, but beyond the glass, a faint grey light reveals shapes that were invisible during the night. Trees appear first, their branches covered with thick layers of snow. Then the outlines of the mountains slowly return, rising in the distance like enormous shadows becoming real again. The blizzard has changed everything. The road you travelled yesterday is now covered beneath a smooth blanket of white. The paths around the lodge have disappeared. The landscape looks untouched, almost as if no person has ever walked through this place. You know that is not true. The footprints from yesterday may be hidden, but the memories remain. You dress slowly, enjoying the quiet routine of preparing for the day. The room feels familiar now. Yesterday, it was simply a place where you slept. This morning, it feels like a small corner of the world that belongs to your story. You pull on your boots and step into the hallway. The lodge is waking up. You hear soft movement downstairs. Someone is preparing coffee. A door opens and closes gently. The building makes its usual morning sounds, the same wooden creaks and quiet noises that welcomed you during the night. When you reach the main room, the first thing you notice is the light. The fireplace is glowing again, and the morning sun is beginning to enter through the windows. The room that felt like a shelter from the storm now feels like a place of discovery. Guests gather near the windows, looking outside with the same curiosity you feel. Everyone has the expression of people who know they have witnessed something memorable. The storm did not simply pass, it created an experience. Someone jokes about the amount of snow outside and wonders whether the road has decided to disappear permanently. Everyone laughs softly after a night like this. After, humour becomes another form of warmth. The lodge keeper walks through the room, answering questions and checking the conditions outside. He explains that the storm has weakened, but travel will depend on clearing paths and assessing the roads. You notice the patience in his voice. He understands that the mountain operates on its own schedule. During this period, mountain communities often depended on cooperation after heavy snowfall. Neighbours helped clear paths, checked on one another, and shared supplies when weather created difficulties. This was especially important in remote areas where assistance could not arrive quickly. You think about how different this feels from many modern experiences. Today, people often expect immediate solutions. A problem appears, and there is an assumption that someone or something will quickly fix it. In places like this lodge, patience and cooperation are part of everyday life. A small forgotten habit from earlier winter mornings was the practice of warming clothing near fireplaces before heading outside. Travellers would place gloves, boots, and coats near the heat so they would not face the first shock of cold air. It was a simple routine, but on a freezing mountain morning, it made a noticeable difference. You imagine previous guests following the same ritual, drying gloves, adjusting scarves, preparing for the outside world. The actions are ordinary, but they connect generations of travellers who face similar mornings. You walk closer to the window and watch sunlight spread across the snow. The mountains look completely different from yesterday. The storm was powerful, but the morning reveals a calm beauty hidden beneath it. Fresh snow covers every surface. The trees sparkle. The air outside looks almost blue and silver in the early light. The wilderness has transformed overnight. The conversation in the lodge turns toward the storm itself. Guests compare memories, discussing how strong the wind sounded and how much snow they think fell. Everyone has a slightly different impression. That is often how memories work. People experience the same event but remember different details. You remember the sound of the wind against the window. Someone else remembers the warmth of the fireplace. Another person remembers the dinner shared with strangers. All of these memories become part of the same night. The way people remember travel experiences has interested historians and researchers for many years. The historical conversation continues around the question of whether personal memories reveal more about everyday life than official records do. Some experts believe ordinary stories provide valuable insight into the past, while others point out that memories can change over time. You look around the lodge and understand why both ideas matter. The building itself provides evidence. The guest book provides evidence. The stories people tell provide another kind of evidence. Together, they create a fuller picture. The morning continues gently. Coffee cups are filled. Breakfast preparations begin. The guests who were strangers yesterday now greet each other like old acquaintances. The storm created a temporary community. That may be one of the most interesting things about unexpected events. They interrupt normal routines and create connections that might never happen otherwise. You think about your own journey here. If the weather had remained clear, perhaps the evening would have been pleasant but ordinary. You might have enjoyed the view, eaten dinner, and gone to sleep without much thought. Instead, the storm changed everything. It forced everyone to slow down, it encouraged conversation. It turned a simple overnight stay into a memory. You step outside briefly with the others. The cold air immediately reminds you that the mountain has not become gentle overnight. The snow is beautiful, but it still demands respect. Your boots sink slightly as you walk, and the silence around the lodge feels enormous. You look back at the building, the wooden walls, the glowing windows, the chimney sending a thin line of smoke into the clear morning sky. After everything the storm brought, the lodge appears even more welcoming than before. You realize that places become meaningful because of the moments they hold. A building is not only made from materials, it is shaped by experiences. Last night, this lodge held uncertainty. This morning, it holds relief. And as you stand beneath the bright winter sky, surrounded by the freshly covered Rockies, you feel grateful for the storm that slowed everything down and allowed you to notice the quiet beauty of a mountain morning. The morning continues to unfold slowly, and the lodge gradually returns to its familiar rhythm. The storm that controlled every moment of the night has become a memory, but its presence remains everywhere. Snow covers the outdoor paths. The trees carry heavy white layers on their branches. The mountains shine beneath the clear sky as if they are showing a completely different personality. You stand near the entrance, brushing snow from your boots before stepping back inside. The cold air follows you briefly, filling the doorway with a sharp freshness before the warmth of the lodge welcomes you again. It feels strange how quickly a place can change. Last night, the lodge was a shelter surrounded by uncertainty. This morning, it feels like a gathering place surrounded by beauty. The guests are no longer waiting nervously for weather updates. Instead, they are moving around with a sense of curiosity. People are checking the condition, taking photographs, and discussing plans for the day. The storm created a pause, but life is beginning to move again. You notice that the people who arrived as strangers now exchange greetings easily. The couple from dinner asks another traveller if they slept well. Someone near the fireplace offers advice about the safest path outside. Small conversations that might never have happened under ordinary circumstances continue naturally. This is one of the quiet effects of shared challenges. They create connections. Throughout history, communities have often formed around cooperation during difficult moments, whether in small towns, remote settlements, or travel destinations. People have relied on one another when circumstances required patience and teamwork. The lodge reflects that tradition. The staff begin their morning tasks, supplies are checked, rooms are prepared. Snow is cleared from important pathways. The work is practical, but there is a sense of pride behind it. Maintaining a mountain lodge is not only a job, it is a way of preserving a place where people come to experience something meaningful. You watch the lodge keeper walk outside with a careful step. Inspecting the area around the building, he looks toward the mountains for a long moment, as though reading the landscape. Perhaps he is thinking about the storm. Perhaps he's simply appreciating the morning. By 1962, outdoor tourism had become an important part of leisure culture, and many Americans were seeking experiences that combined comfort with adventure. Mountain resorts, ski areas, and wilderness retreats attracted visitors who wanted to escape ordinary routines while still having a reliable place to return to at the end of the day. You think about the balance this lodge creates. It allows you to experience the mountain without completely leaving behind comfort. You can enjoy the snow without sleeping beneath the open sky. You can appreciate the wilderness while sitting beside a warm fire. You can feel distant from the modern world without being completely disconnected from it. A charming oddity from winter recreation history is that early ski travellers often carried extra layers of clothing not only for warmth but also for social occasions after skiing. A person might spend hours outdoors battling snow and wind, then change into cleaner clothes for an evening meal or gathering. Winter trips were not just about activities. They were also about the community built afterward. You imagine those evenings, guests returning from snowy trails, boots drying near the entrance, stories being exchanged beside the fire, the same patterns repeating year after year. You look around the lodge and realise that today's guests are continuing a tradition that began long before they arrived. Breakfast is served, and the dining room becomes lively again. The smell of fresh coffee fills the air. Plates of warm food are placed on the table. Conversations move easily between topics. Someone mentions the storm was the strongest they have experienced in years. Another person says they enjoyed being forced to slow down. You understand that feeling. There was something almost refreshing about having plans interrupted. The storm removed the pressure to be productive. It created a rare situation where waiting was not a problem to solve, it was simply part of the experience. Researchers still examine how people's attitudes toward leisure changed during the 20th century. Some argue that vacations became increasingly focused on activities and achievement, while others believe many travellers were actually searching for rest and emotional renewal. You think this lodge represents both possibilities. Some guests came to ski, some came to explore, some came simply to escape, but everyone found a moment of stillness. You step outside again after breakfast and follow a cleared path near the lodge. The snow beneath your boots makes a soft crunching sound. The air is cold enough to feel refreshing but calm enough to invite exploration. The landscape seems enormous now that the storm has passed. Yesterday, the mountains felt hidden and mysterious. Today, they reveal themselves. You see the outlines of distant peaks. You notice sunlight reflecting from snow-covered branches. You hear the occasional call of a bird returning to the quiet forest. The storm did not damage the beauty of the landscape. It revealed it in a different way. There is still an interesting question among historians and cultural researchers about whether people seek wilderness because they want to escape society or because they want to better understand their place within it. Some believe nature provides distance from human concerns. Others suggest that time spent outdoors helps people reconnect with deeper parts of themselves. You look back at the lodge and consider that idea. Perhaps the answer is not one or the other. Maybe people come to places like this because they need both. They need distance, they need connection, they need a reminder that the world is larger than their daily routines. You return toward the lodge as the morning grows brighter. The building looks exactly as it did before the storm, yet somehow it feels different. The same walls now carry another memory. The same rooms hold another story. The storm has become part of the lodge's history, and it has become part of yours. Soon, the guests will begin preparing for departure, vehicles will be checked, bags will be packed, roads will be discussed. The temporary community created by the snowfall will slowly separate again. But before that happens, you take one more moment to stand near the entrance and look across the snowy mountains. You arrived searching for a quiet retreat. You found something more. You found a reminder that sometimes the most memorable journeys are not the ones where everything goes according to plan. Sometimes they are the ones where the world asks you to slow down, stay a while, and simply listen. The time to leave begins arriving quietly, almost without announcement. There is no sudden moment when the lodge transforms from a home into a temporary stop. Instead, the signs appear gradually. Suitcases are brought into the hallway, coats are lifted from hooks, gloves are collected from near the fireplace. Conversations shift from what happened last night to where everyone is heading next. You stand in your room for a moment, looking around. It feels different now. When you first entered this space, it was unfamiliar. The bed was simply a place to rest after a long journey. The window was just a window looking toward a storm. The wooden walls were only part of a building. Now, every detail carries a memory. The sound of wind during the night, the feeling of warmth beneath heavy blankets, the quiet morning light spreading across fresh snow. A place becomes meaningful through the moments experienced there. You fold your clothes carefully and prepare your bag. The routine is ordinary, but you notice yourself moving more slowly than usual. There is a small part of you that does not want to rush this final morning. Outside, the Rockies are calm again. The storm that kept everyone inside has moved on, leaving behind a landscape that looks almost unreal. Snow covers the ground like a clean white blanket. The trees stand quietly. The sky above the mountains is bright and open. It is difficult to believe that only hours earlier, the same landscape was hidden behind a wall of wind and snow. You carry your bag downstairs and place it near the entrance. The lodge feels busy now, but in a peaceful way. Guests are preparing for their own departures, exchanging final stories and saying goodbye. The strangers from yesterday have become familiar faces. The couple who shared dinner with you, the traveller who told stories beside the fireplace, the guests who laughed about being trapped by the weather. Everyone arrived with separate plans, but the storm created a shared experience that connected them. This kind of temporary community has appeared throughout travel history. People often form unexpected bonds when they share unusual circumstances. Delayed journey, a difficult road, or an unfamiliar place can create conversations that might never happen otherwise. The early 1960s were a period when travel was becoming more accessible for many families, but journeys still required more personal interaction than they often do today. Travellers depended on local advice, roadside stops, and conversations with people who knew the area. A defining change of this era was the increasing popularity of family road travel. Cars allowed more people to explore distant destinations, creating new patterns of tourism across the country. Mountain towns and lodges benefited from this movement as travellers searched for scenic escapes and memorable experiences. You think about the road waiting outside. Yesterday, it brought you here through uncertain weather. Today, it will carry you away. The lodge keeper approaches and gives updates about the route. The road has been checked, and conditions are improving. Travel is possible, but everyone is reminded to remain careful. The mountain has allowed visitors to leave, but it still expects respect. You step outside with the others and feel the cold morning air. The brightness is almost surprising after the darkness of the storm. Snow reflects the sunlight, making the landscape appear larger and more dramatic. The lodge stands behind you, its wooden walls glowing beneath the clear sky. You take a moment to appreciate it. A curious reminder from earlier travel culture is that many vacationers collected small souvenirs from places they visited, not only as decorations but as physical reminders of personal experiences. A simple postcard, carved object, or local craft could hold the memory of an entire journey. These small items became personal museums of ordinary adventures. You understand why. People want something tangible to remember places that changed them. The lodge itself feels like that kind of memory. You walk toward the vehicle and notice the fresh tracks left in the snow. Yesterday, the road disappeared. Today, it slowly returns. The landscape is beginning to open again before leaving. You look back one more time. There is an ongoing conversation among historians about how travellers remember places after they leave them. Some believe memories become stronger when connected to challenges and unexpected events. Others suggest that people often reshape experiences over time, turning ordinary moments into meaningful stories. Perhaps that is what will happen with this lodge. Years from now, you may remember the storm more than the exact details of the journey. You may remember the sound of snow against the window more than the road you travelled. You may remember the warmth of the fireplace more than the room itself. Memory chooses what matters. You say goodbye to the lodge keeper and thank him for the hospitality. He responds with the calm confidence of someone who has welcomed many travellers before you. He knows that guests come and go. He knows that the mountains remain. The vehicle begins moving slowly along the snowy road. You watch the lodge become smaller behind you. For a moment, you feel the strange feeling that comes after leaving somewhere meaningful. You're happy to continue the journey, but part of you remains connected to the place you're leaving behind. The road winds through the mountains. Snow-covered trees pass by the windows. The landscape that felt overwhelming during the storm now feels peaceful. You notice details you missed on the way in. A frozen stream beside the road, animal tracks crossing the snow, sunlight shining through branches. The mountains reveal themselves gradually, as if saying goodbye in their own quiet way. You realize that the storm did not interrupt your journey. It created it. Without the snow, you might have simply visited a lodge. Because of the storm, you experienced a story. A night of warmth, a morning of discovery, a reminder that travel is not only about reaching places, it is about what happens while you are there. The road continues forward, carrying you away from the lodge and deeper into the rest of your journey. Yet somewhere behind you, beneath the snowy peaks of the Rockies, the little wooden building remains. The fire will burn again. New guests will arrive, new stories will begin. And your winter night in 1962 will become one more quiet memory held by the mountains. The road carries you farther from the lodge, but the feeling of the place remains with you. As the mountains slowly move behind the vehicle, you keep looking back through the window, catching glimpses of snowy peaks between the trees. The lodge becomes smaller with every mile, yet somehow the memory of it becomes larger. That is the strange power of certain places. They do not have to be famous landmarks. They do not need grand monuments or dramatic stories. Sometimes a simple wooden building surrounded by snow can become unforgettable because of what happened there. You think about the role mountain retreats have played over generations. These places have offered travellers something that ordinary hotels and busy towns often cannot provide. They create distance from everyday routines. They encourage people to slow down. They remind visitors that the world continues beyond schedules and responsibilities. The idea of escaping into nature has deep roots. But mountain tourism changed significantly during the 20th century. As transportation improved and more people had opportunities for leisure travel, remote landscapes became increasingly accessible. Resorts, lodges, and outdoor destinations grew into important parts of vacation culture. The world of the early 1960s was shaped by this growing interest in recreation and exploration. Families were taking longer road trips, outdoor activities were becoming more popular, and many people were searching for experiences that combined adventure with comfort. You imagine all the travellers who came before you, someone arriving after a long drive, someone stepping into the warmth of a lodge after hours in the cold, someone sitting beside the same fireplace, listening to the same mountains breathe outside. The details of their lives may have been different, but the feeling was probably familiar. A place like this becomes a meeting point between generations. You think about how mountain retreats changed over time. Early cabins and wilderness shelters often existed because people needed practical places to stay while working, exploring, or travelling through difficult areas. Later, many of these locations became destinations where visitors came by choice, looking for relaxation and connection with nature. A small curiosity from the history of mountain lodging is that many early guest areas displayed handwritten recommendations from previous visitors. Before online reviews and travel websites, travellers often depended on personal notes, word of mouth, and local advice. A few sentences from a former guest could influence someone's entire journey. You can almost imagine a traveller reading an old note near the fireplace. The view is beautiful, the soup is excellent. Bring a warmer coat. Simple advice, but incredibly valuable. Today, information travels instantly. A person can search hundreds of opinions in moments. Yet there is something charming about the slower communication of the past. A handwritten suggestion carried the personality of the person who left it behind. You think about that connection between past and present. The lodge may belong to 1962, but the reasons people visit places like it remain familiar. They want quiet. They want beauty. They want a temporary escape from the constant movement of everyday life. The meaning of these retreats has been examined by historians and cultural researchers for decades. Different scholars have viewed these places in contrasting ways. Some see mountain lodges as important spaces where people develop deeper appreciation for nature. Others believe these destinations transformed wilderness into a carefully managed experience designed around human comfort. The debate is complicated because both ideas contain some truth. The lodge allowed you to experience the mountains, but it also protected you from the harshest parts of them. You were close to wilderness, but you were not completely alone within it. Perhaps that balance is exactly why these places became so popular. People often seek nature, but they also seek safety. They want adventure, but they appreciate a warm room waiting afterward. They want silence, but they enjoy sharing stories with others. You remember the guests from the lodge. Their backgrounds were different, but everyone seemed to understand the importance of that temporary escape. The storm created a shared experience that transformed strangers into companions. This is part of the lasting legacy of mountain retreats. They create moments where people reconnect, not only with landscapes, but with each other. You think about the future of places like the lodge. The world will continue changing. Technology will improve, travel will become faster, communication will become easier. New generations will discover mountains in new ways. But the basic human desire behind these journeys will probably remain. People will still want to stand beneath tall peaks. They will still want to breathe cold mountain air. They will still want to sit near a fire after a day outside. They will still want stories to tell when they return home. The mountains provide something difficult to find elsewhere. Perspective. Standing among enormous landscapes reminds people that their daily worries are only one small part of a much larger world. You felt that during the storm, when the road disappeared, when the wind surrounded the lodge, and when the world outside became quiet. The usual concerns of everyday life seemed much smaller. The mountain did not solve your problems. It simply gave you enough silence to see them differently. That may be one reason retreats continue to attract visitors. The way people understand these experiences continues to evolve. Researchers continue to weigh the impact of tourism on natural spaces, asking how communities can welcome visitors while protecting the landscapes that make those places special. The question has no simple answer. Too little access can make beautiful places difficult for people to experience. Too much access can damage the very qualities visitors hope to find. Finding balance remains an ongoing challenge. As your journey continues, you think about the lodge standing quietly among the snowy peaks. New visitors will arrive, new storms will come, new stories will be created. The building will continue collecting memories. A child seeing snow for the first time, a traveller finding peace after a difficult journey, a family sharing a meal beside the fire, a person sitting quietly near the window, watching the mountains disappear beneath snowfall. Each experience becomes part of the invisible history of the place. You realise that the true legacy of a mountain retreat is not only the building itself, it is the collection of human moments that happen inside it. The laughter, the conversations, the quiet reflections, the memories carried home afterward. Your own night in the Rockies has become part of that tradition. The storm brought uncertainty, but it also brought connection. The snow blocked the road, but it opened a different path. The lodge gave you more than shelter. It gave you a reminder. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys are the ones that slow you down long enough to notice where you are. And as the mountains fade farther into the distance, you carry that lesson with you. A quiet memory of warmth, snow and a wooden lodge standing peacefully beneath the winter ski. The mountains are now farther behind you, but the feeling of the lodge remains close. The road continues forward through the snowy landscape, carrying you away from the place where one unusual winter night became a lasting memory. You look out the window and watch the Rockies slowly change with every mile. The peaks become distant shapes. The forests become quieter. The lodge becomes a small point somewhere behind the horizon, yet the experience stays with you. You realise that some journeys do not end when you leave a place. They continue through the stories you tell, the memories you keep, and the way a moment changes how you see the world. The night at the lodge was not a grand historical event recorded in newspapers. There were no famous speeches, no important discoveries, and no dramatic announcements. It was simply an ordinary person experiencing an extraordinary evening. That is often where the most personal history lives. A family meal, a conversation with strangers, a quiet room during a storm, a morning when the world looked completely different. The history of everyday life is built from these small experiences. You think about the year 1962 and everything happening beyond the mountains. The world was moving quickly. Technology was advancing. Society was changing. People were beginning to imagine new possibilities for travel, communication, and daily life. Yet even during a period of rapid change, many people still searched for moments of simplicity. A winter lodge offered exactly that. It created a place where people could step away from the speed of the outside world and reconnect with slower traditions. There were still handwritten notes instead of instant messages. There were still conversations beside fireplaces instead of endless digital distractions. There were still moments when weather could completely change the plans of everyone nearby. A forgotten feature of travel from this era was the importance of personal recommendations. Before modern travel platforms became common, many people depended on advice from friends, relatives, and local communities. A trusted suggestion could lead someone to a hidden destination that might never appear in a large advertisement. You think about how the lodge itself may have been discovered by many travellers this way. Someone heard about it from a friend, someone returned year after year. Someone brought their family because they wanted to share the same feeling. Places become traditions because people pass them along. The lodge was never only a building, it was a story that continued with every visitor. The question of how people connect with meaningful places remains a fascinating subject among historians. Some researchers believe locations become important because of the events that happen there. Others suggest that the emotions people attach to places are what truly create their significance. Perhaps both are necessary. A place provides the setting, people provide the meaning. You think about the fireplace where everyone gathered, the table where strangers shared dinner, the hallway where travellers carried their bags after arriving through the storm. These ordinary spaces became special because of what happened within them. The same room can feel completely different depending on the memories attached to it. A dining room can become the place where friendships begin. A bedroom can become the place where someone finally rests after a difficult journey. A window can become the place where someone watches a storm and realizes they are exactly where they need to be. You look back one final time in your imagination. The lodge is glowing beneath the winter sky. Smoke rises gently from the chimney. Snow rests on the roof. The mountains stand quietly around it. Inside, another evening is beginning. Another group of travellers is arriving. Another fire is being prepared. Another story is waiting to happen. The cycle continues. That may be the most beautiful thing about places like this. They are temporary experiences for visitors, but permanent witnesses to countless human moments. The Rockies have seen generations change. They have watched roads appear and expand. They have watched travel become faster and easier. They have watched people arrive searching for adventure, comfort, and peace. Through all these changes, the mountains remain, and perhaps that is why people continue returning. They come to remember something important. The world is larger than their daily worries. Silence can be meaningful. A slower pace can be valuable. A single evening can become a memory that lasts for years. You carry these thoughts with you as the road continues. The snow-covered landscape gradually gives way to familiar surroundings. The journey home begins. But a small part of you remains beside that fireplace, listening to the wind outside the wooden walls. The mountain lodge of 1962 becomes a place that exists both in the past and in your memory. A place of snow, a place of warmth, a place where time seemed to slow down. And as the distance grows between you and the Rockies, you understand that the greatest gift of the journey was not simply seeing the mountains, it was learning how to be still within them. The road becomes quieter now, and the memories of the lodge begin to soften like fresh snow under gentle morning light. You no longer need to hold on to every detail. The sound of the wind, the warmth of the fire, and the glow of the windows remain safely tucked away in your mind. You imagine the lodge resting peacefully beneath the stars. The wooden walls stand strong. The mountains surround it. Snow falls softly across the landscape, covering the paths and smoothing every sharp edge. The storm is gone. The night has passed. What remains is only calm. You allow yourself to return to that peaceful room for one final moment. The blanket is warm. The fire is glowing. The world outside is quiet. There is nowhere else you need to be. You breathe slowly and remember the feeling of being sheltered in the Rockies, far away from ordinary worries and surrounded by simple comforts. The mountains do not hurry. The snow does not hurry. The stars above the lodge do not hurry. And you do not need to hurry either. Let the memory fade gently now. Let the road grow softer. Let the fireplace glow become smaller in the distance. Let the quiet of the winter night settle around you like a comfortable blanket. The lodge remains there, waiting among the mountains, holding its stories and welcoming new travellers. And for tonight, you can simply rest. You can drift. You can let the peaceful sounds of the snowy wilderness carry you into sleep. Good night, traveller. The mountains are quiet, the fire is warm, the winter night is peaceful. Sweet dreams.